Bungalow Bill here, and welcome back to the Live Wood Kneader series. This is me in post. I have already recorded this, I have already posted episode 6, and this is what I would call episode 6.5. These are all of the building clips from episode 6, joined back together tip to tail, and replayed at 2 times speed with a voiceover in post. So what I'm building here is a missile submarine. These missile units are large missiles that are 8 units tall, and I kind of find this to be the minimum for a general purpose missile. I do try to purpose this as a torpedo submarine as well, as sort of a mixed purpose thing, but vertically launched torpedoes with only 8 segments are not a fantastic idea. I think a better general purpose torpedo size might be around 12 segments, and you probably want like the normal forward launch torpedo tubes, because I do think that there's going to be a chance that these will breach. Now, I should also say that if you haven't really seen this series before, or haven't been following along since the beginning, the idea here is that I'm playing through Kneader on the easy difficulty, but with a few restrictions. I only build my craft out of wood, I only build them in the campaign mode, and I only use prefabs and sub-objects that I've already built in the campaign mode. So what makes this a little bit difficult for me is that I get interrupted a lot by battles, and that doesn't always make a great viewing experience. So that's the reason that I'm doing things the way that I am here, where I condense all of the battles, I condense all of the building, and hopefully this provides a better experience than it has in the past. So right now, I'm trying to finish building my missile pods. I have ejectors to try to get them to the surface faster. I'm just trying to fill a little bit of space, put everything together, give it, timing delays, firing controls, that sort of stuff. And connect it all to the AI. Because these missiles are fairly tough compared to what else I have to work with, which is wood. I'm sandwiching the mainframe and my GBP and that sort of stuff between the missiles. I'm also going to be putting something else between the missiles, because large missiles like this require a lot of ammo. And with a wooden submarine like this, it's going to be very difficult to separate that ammo in a way that it won't chain detonate. So I've just sort of accepted that it is going to chain detonate. And I put my ammo here, it's the best protected place. If this ammo gets hit, the submarine's AI dead. It has absolutely no chance. But I don't really see a way around this. I think this is just how it has to be. Another thing is that wood is not volume efficient armor, and it floats really well. So if I want my submarine to be sufficiently close to neutrally buoyant that I can actually have it submerge, I can't use much armor. This has at best 1 layer of wooden armor. In some places I don't believe it even has that. I'm also just quickly throwing down one of my engine prefabs that I've been using through this campaign. It's a supercharger engine, so if I put a few too many, I get pretty good power per material. It's tougher than wood, so, throwing a few extra around the AI and that sort of thing isn't a terrible idea, and it's heavy, so it'll counteract the buoyancy of wood a bit. And engines aren't that expensive, so I don't have a huge problem with having a few too many. Now I'm tossing in turret wells. So the CWIS turrets that I've been using up through now, they use supercavitation base rounds, so I plop 2 down into the submarine. They will both help me take out enemy submarines, enemy vehicles, and most importantly, enemy missiles. So I replicate the same thing back here, throw another turret well around it, and I have the basic armament for my submarine done. So something else that is a big part of building this series is I don't get to combat test these craft. Right, I'm building them in the campaign mode, and that's it. I can do a little bit of movement testing. I can maybe make sure that my turrets are able to turn and that sort of thing, but I can't make sure that everything works, and I don't know what your experience has been in the past with playing From the Depths, but things often don't just work. However, in this series, it is very expensive for me if they don't. So far, only minor things have gone wrong, but that won't necessarily always continue. These submarines are going to be critically important against the Lightning Hoods in the coming episode, because without them, I have absolutely nothing. And I really can't afford for them to not work. At the same time, I spend a total of, I believe, 44 minutes in-game building this. That's really all the time that I have. By the end of this episode, I'm fighting the Lightning Hoods. Because, if you've seen episode 6, I go through the diplomacy episode at the end of that, and this building series continues for a few more minutes. But by the end of this building, and which transitions into the beginning of the next episode, I'm out of time. The Lightning Hoods are here. So, if you haven't tried this sort of thing before, it's a lot of fun, but it's quite stressful, and you definitely have to be ready for it. So here, I've got some holes in my armor. I'm not terribly concerned, because my armor doesn't really do anything. Many of the enemy vehicles are not particularly good at fighting against submarines, so for me it's either I kill all of their torpedoes or I die. There aren't many enemy craft with supercavitation base rounds. These propeller blades shouldn't connect. That's a bug that was supposed to have been fixed. They're not supposed to connect until I build this cross under them. But anyway, I'm putting in propeller blades here, and I'm going to be giving them 2 different controls. I'm going to be giving them pitch, and I'm going to be giving them hover. And they're going to be one of the primary mechanisms responsible for keeping the submarine underwater and level. I do this because I'm trying to play around with the new systems a lot, and the propeller blades should be very efficient and very power dense for a purpose like this. So it'll be interesting to see how these work. I build a lot of redundant systems, though, when it comes to controlling the submarine. So I'm going to prefab this and stick it on the back. And that'll be primarily what's responsible for making this act like a submarine. Although I still need a power plant to push it forwards, I still need roll control, and I could really use a little bit more redundant control elsewhere. Now, I don't want this to look like complete garbage, so I do a little bit of work at making it look submarine-y. It's not fantastic, but it's something. It also, might serve as a tiny bit of a blade of armor, because if it takes a small explosive hit to the side here, hopefully the explosive radius won't actually destroy everything. I twiddle around here, forgetting how large steam propellers actually are. Yes, they don't fit, and I do this twice. But eventually they do fit. Yeah, these are still just a hair too close. Third time's the charm, though. When I put them down the first time, the outer ones were the exact closest together that they could have been. So turning off movement so that I don't just burn my materials for nothing. That is a big thing for me because I'm building in the campaign mode, so any material that I burn during testing is material that I don't have. I am a lot richer than I was in the beginning. Right in the beginning, this was a huge deal for me. I'm not spending a lot of time here, I'm just jamming fuel tanks wherever there's room for them. Usually I use the 3x3 just to be a little bit more block efficient, but I have a little bit of spare space, so I just kind of stick these around wherever they go. And we get a hard cut because I was doing some battles. And I go back to the exterior, which is just going back and forth a few times to make things kind of smoothed out so it's not horribly ugly. Since I don't want to spend too much time, I use the symmetry here to go and slap what was the top on the bottom of the opposite side. And fill that in. Now, really, I could probably leave some holes there for buoyancy reasons. The submarine does wind up being a little bit floatier than I would otherwise like it to be. Although, I do come in I do come in here with the perspective of someone who has already tested this, and because I've already filmed episode 7, I just got really sick this last week, so I didn't do this voiceover, and as a consequence, I haven't edited or posted episode 7 because I wanted to post this first. I already know how this craft performs. Alright, so here I'm putting on hinges for the custom rudders. I kind of consider them a new thing, although they've been in the game for a while now. It's just they're much stronger than they used to be. And they're another thing that I want to get used to and start to use so that I have a little bit more of a perspective on how they should work. Fuel engines are another one of those things, because you see that I've been using them during the series, but I'm not really an expert on them. I've only used supercharger engines, and mine work and aren't horribly suboptimal, but they're not optimal either. I've spent a little bit of time in the designer since then making better supercharger engines, and I've been tweaking around a little bit with turbo engines. I think I have a pretty good grasp on them now, how they work mechanically, but I still need to go and actually hammer out a good Tetris for them. I think there's... degenerate might not be the right word, but I think that the optimal build for them is slightly degenerate and maybe not intended. That I still don't think is fantastic, but I don't think it uses it doesn't use all the parts that they want you to use. And the reason for that is that the cylinders just don't produce enough exhaust pressure. So you wind up with some interesting strategies. Oh, and the way that the exhaust pressure is consumed and give you bonuses and that sort of stuff. So anyway, this isn't exactly the best drag reduction or the prettiest, but given the time constraints, it's not terrible. So slap a snoot on it. It is effectively a submarine now. I have a little bit of, hopefully, prefab work to do. I really hope I use the prefab tool. There I go. And use my symmetries again. And now I have drag reduction. Really, my target for the submarine was 40 meters per second. I don't make it there. A lot of holes on the bottom. Realistically, these don't really need to be covered up. There's also a little bit of, well, questionable utility to putting some wood on the bottom of the submarine because it makes it a little bit less stable, but I decided to cover up those bits, even if it's just with a single layer of wood, that will really not protect me from anything. Kind of the same here. And basically, this is a working submarine. However, it doesn't have defenses, so we're putting in some anti-torpedoes. With anti-missiles, I really like to have them point directly at the enemy missiles. Torpedoes move way slower and generally have better turning radiuses, so I think they're much more forgiving. You can just have them launch whatever way you want. I set all this stuff up, APN guidance rather than a fuel tank, and a torpedo propeller rather than a variable thruster. Sort of fix the same thing on this side, but then I go and prefab them in a bunch of places all over the craft. So get this going, capture the prefab. I don't think I actually save it, which is maybe a little bit of a mistake, but I'm probably not going to build another submarine. So it's fine. And I really go overkill on these because I can't rely on my armor to tank any torpedoes. Either I kill every torpedo or I die. So now I'm doing a little bit of tweaking. Basically, I'm trying to make sure that the submarine actually goes below the surface, so I set a negative combat altitude. Because of how I'm having it move with the roll and pitch custom rudders on the side, I ultimately make the decision after waffling around here for a little bit that I'm going to use an airplane AI. It'll happen eventually. I'm like pretty sure. There we go. And I don't really do too much to it. I don't think it really matters that much. I probably could have turned the idle thrust down to 0. Because this benefits a lot from the airplane AI, but it could also go forwards and backwards. The airplane AI just won't go backwards. So now I'm putting in some roll and pitch propellers. They have the benefit of being way more durable than the wood that's around them. And unlike the custom rudders and the propeller blades, they have instantaneous responses, so they should make the ship a lot more stable. And it's just good to have a lot of redundancy, so that I'm not really worried if maybe a stray supercavitation-based shell or even like a stray cram cannon blows the corner of the ship off. As long as it doesn't hit the ammo rack, the thing will still float successfully. Alright, some shoddy editing work later that hopefully I will have cut out. And I'm putting in detection. So detection has drag reduction, so I'm putting a little bit on the snoot. I think I go back and put more detection there to cover sort of the other portion, but I'm just sprinkling various sorts of passive and active sonar everywhere. Passive sonar is very good at detecting enemy torpedoes that have active sonar, as well as ships that have active sonar, although torpedoes that have remote guidance are almost invisible to it, and I believe at one time may have been completely invisible, although fortunately that is not the case anymore. Detection in general has gotten way better at detecting missiles and torpedoes, so it's not as specific as it used to be. You basically used to have need passive radar, passive sonar, and then if you're above water, the little munitions detectors things. And if those couldn't see it, well, nothing could. So fortunately, it's better now. I just put an absolute liberal dosage of this stuff everywhere. I don't really care that these are blocked forwards and aft because I have a broadside routine on. I put a little frame around the propellers so the butt doesn't look naked, but I don't wind up actually putting that much effort into it because I don't actually have that much time. And I remember that I had mirror mode off, which means that I actually have to go back and fix the detection, although I believe I realized that here as well, so I go and fix the detection. There was a little pop-up there because I have an enemy fleet bothering me, and I think that means that I wind up having to... No, I do the detection here. It doesn't take me very long. I think that's pretty much it for the detection. If I missed something, it's probably not that important. Jump cut while I do a battle. And I put a few more rudders on. I already have some, but more control authority is better, and I shorten the other ones because the bigger your rudder is, the slower it is to react. And I find that makes it very hard for some vehicles to be stable. I believe I'm putting in radar buoys right now. The idea behind these is that they'll fly up on sticks with cables behind them and sort of float in the air. I messed this up a little bit. I give them drums instead of harpoons, and drums do not connect the cable to the missile. They only extend the length of the cable that you can carry. You need a harpoon to actually stick the cable onto it, so these just kind of fly up into the air. They still work, but well, they don't do exactly what I want it to. I go back and fix these later. I haven't tested that to actually make sure if the fixed version works yet, because I do that at the end of the next episode. But hopefully it works. And I twiddle around just so that these will fire if there's an enemy anywhere near me. I do have, and possibly I should just fire them at the beginning of a battle, which would, in this case, just have them be set to be fired all the time. And if I did that, I actually would have figured out that they don't quite work properly. I do have wireless snoopers in here somewhere, so I think I should have wireless snoopers. So I should know if there's a stealth enemy that I can't otherwise detect. And I suppose there is the automatic detection is set to 0.1, it's the default, so I will know that there's an enemy. If it was 0, I wouldn't know. And I find that I have a little bit of GPP left over even when I take into account the new radar buoys that I added, so toss some stuff in until it's all used. And I've got a submarine, so let's put her underwater and get her going. This is when I realized that my maximum altitude is 0, which means that, well, I don't realize that yet. I realize that eventually. At some point, I figure out that her maximum altitude is 0, and because of that, she won't submerge because I can't tell her to go below 0. There we go. Unfortunately, submarines will always spawn on the surface when you begin a fight, and these have 1 layer of wooden armor, so when I spawn these against the lightning hoods, there is still the possibility that they just get absolutely shredded. So I fiddle around with my PIDs for a little while because she's not terribly stable, but she's working, right? We've got something that went underwater. Our speed's okay. It's not fantastic. We're hitting about 30 meters per second top speed. I also quickly start making some torpedoes here, but I get interrupted by the diplomacy screen and wind up finishing that off later. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope to see you in the future.